The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hi, welcome to the latest episode of Mental Health Now. I'm your host, Matthew Shapiro from the National Alliance on Mental Illness New York State, or NAMI-NYS. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, advocacy, telling your story, and the importance of creativity in mental health recovery. And I'm very lucky to be joined today by three very talented young adults who helped contribute to the new book, Stars, a collection of poetry. And our first guest today is Joseph Fusaro, who helped curate the book. So welcome, Joe.
Hey, Matt. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And of course, thank you so much for telling your story and always being so open about it. I think that's one of the big breakthroughs we're finding in mental health and the conversations that for so long people didn't want to talk about mental health issues. But something I say all the time kind of makes me sound like an old fuddy-duddy, though, is that your generation is really the one that's changing the conversation about mental health and making it more topical and more an everyday conversation. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks for giving us a place to talk, because I think a lot of us want to talk about our, what's going on in our mental health, but we don't know where to go because we've never been allowed to talk about it.
Right, and that's something I say all the time too, one of my cliche stories. I think you're right, people have been held back from talking about mental health. I remember when I was younger in high school and I was having a lot of issues, we didn't talk about it. When my mom got sick and was diagnosed with borderline personality, we didn't talk. I didn't know how to tell my friends what was going on with my mom, but now it's like, everyone's talking about themselves and about family members, and it's so important. So I'll talk a little about your story before we get into the book and how you did that. But now you're someone who's had, mental illness, and you don't have to tell your whole story, but arts and creativity played a real big role in your recovery. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was alone for a while. I isolated a lot because of my anxiety. I had agoraphobia. I had bipolar 1 with serious stints of mania and psychosis. And between hospitalizations and moving around a lot, I was alone most of the time. And for me, I felt like my notebook was the only place that I really had, someone or something to talk to and let out any frustration that I had. And it was a place where I could be myself, and then later try and figure out what was going wrong, and hopefully try and figure out a way to make those things better or change the things in my life that I had to.
Right. So it's very cathartic. Just
Yeah.
We talk about sometimes with therapy too, the cathartic nature, but sometimes just getting it out of you. Actually, one of our next guests, Lindsay, we were talking before about when you get depressed, what's your tips? And a big part of just talking it out, getting it out any way you can, and doing it creatively is so important. Like you and I also have another kind of the love of music, and music was a big part of your recovery too. Like listening to music, you don't even have to play, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love listening to music. That's another thing that I was alone a lot of the times, and the music was something that I had. In fact, I can remember when I was in Los Angeles, I'd really lost everything, house, car, friends, family, and I remember being out there, and I listened to a lot of like Radiohead and Silver Sun Pickups and Arcade Fire, and those three bands really kept me going when I was out there, because I had nothing or nobody. And music, it sounds cliche, but music definitely saved my life during those years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing for me too. When a lot of times I'll just like listen to my headphones, be in my own space, and it's kind of my meditation, and it's so important. So we talk about advocacy here a lot on the show, and about being mental health advocates, and a lot of that is telling your story. I always say the biggest difference between advocacy and like lobbyists, people think of lobbying, but lobbyists are paid lobbyists. They have their their fancy suits, their charts, but we as advocates, we have our personal stories, and that's kind of our tool to get our message across. And you have found so many different ways to tell your story to different types of audiences. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the different ventures you're in. So first is This Is My Brave, which is something that's really cool. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So This Is My Brave is an organization based out of Virginia, and what they do is they go to cities throughout the United States and they put on shows with people that used music, poetry, and writing in their recovery process. And so they'll go to a town, they'll have auditions, they'll get a nice venue, whether it's in a college or, a local venue, usually like, between 200 and 500 people. Wow. And they'll put on a show. They'll have people like Depressed Cake Shop goes and they'll set up like a stand, and they'll just get it. I know NAMI's been involved in some This Is My Brave shows, and they just, they kind of just bring the community together and let like 10 to 15 people come out with their stories. And you'd be amazed. It opens up like a dialogue at dinner tables. It opens up a dialogue, within the town. And that was the first place that I ever told my story up on stage in front of people. So, and then from This Is My Brave, I got into ETS.
Right. So actually, that was a perfect bridge. You would have thought we were planning that. So ETS, we've discussed this on the show a little bit. The Ending the Silence program, which is a NAMI program that's presented in schools for classes or in like auditorium styles, like assembly styles that talk about mental health. It has young adults speaking to young students about mental health issues. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
So I went to a walk a couple years ago, and I didn't know anybody in NAMI, didn't know anybody in town really that was talking about mental health. And I got in touch with one of the directors of NAMI Westchester, and I just said, is there anything that I could do? And she started talking about ETS, and she's like, give us a call. So I took the training, and actually that's where I met Allie, and got trained in ETS, and that fall started presenting at high schools within my town. And now I've probably been to at least 30 or 40 different high schools in town. And I really think that ETS, because the story comes from somebody who's been there. It's not, what I've heard from the teachers is it's not some guy up in a suit, just, preaching out of a textbook, or it's not some doctor telling them that they have to do certain things. It's somebody who's a little bit older than the students, just that can relate to what they're going through. And they said that usually when we come in there, we really get through to at least one or two people. And I've had people stay after, and they'll go get help after class. And I feel like it's a way to show the kids that, it's okay to get help without thinking that they did something wrong. And I think a lot of times, between the advice they get from parents and teachers and what they see other kids go through, they think that they've done something wrong when they have a mental health problem, and they haven't.
Right. Again, like we were talking about before, people have been held through that door. I think you open the door for people, they come rushing through it. I had an experience about a couple of years ago. It's kind of funny. I got invited to speak at Syracuse University, and it was like the NAMI doing an event with a sorority. Now, what they didn't tell me was that it was the African American sorority, and they really wanted me talking about mental health in the African American community, and not on college campuses, which was the talk that I had planned. But I winged it, and at the end of the talk, a gentleman got up. He was twice the size of me, looked like a football player, really big dude. He goes, I gotta tell you something, man. He goes, you're my brother. He said, it doesn't come down to color of your skin or background. He goes, your story is my story. He goes, a couple years ago, I got diagnosed with depression. And he said, I was so afraid to tell my dad. I thought he was going to say, I'm going to smack the depression right out of you. But he supported me. And then the guy came up and gave me a hug. And then as we were walking out, the president of the NAMI affiliate said, I know him really well. He's never told that story. Like, I'm shocked. Like, I know him well. He knows I'm the president of the NAMI on campus. And he never told me he had depression. I think seeing someone like you, someone who looks like you or younger, just, seeing that it's okay to talk about, it opens up so many doors. So thank you for doing that. And a little plug, we are looking to introduce the Ending the Silence program here in the Capital Region. There is no cost to come do it. So if there are schools who are watching, you can visit our website, NAMI-NYS.org, and learn more about the Ending the Silence program. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the book, Stars, a collection of poetry. So you talked about how writing has helped you. How did you have a bunch of artists that have collaborated on this. How did the whole thing come together?
So after This Is My Brave, brave, I decided to write my first book a little more time, and I was scared to put it out, to be honest. I thought when people were going to read what I wrote, they were going to take it as I was manic again, or that I needed to be hospitalized, or that I was more depressed than I was. But really, I wasn't feeling those things. It was stuff that I needed to get out. And it was really hard for me, and I was scared like to death, like shaking before I put the book out.
Was it harder than, it's interesting that you say that, because you would think getting up and speaking in front of like 500 people with This Is My Brave, or getting up in front of people or schools or students and think you're being judged, but harder to write, huh?
That was difficult, but the first book, first of all, a book is forever, right? Like I can't go and find all the people that ordered them and take them back. Like it's on that paper forever. And it was just, I went a lot deeper into myself in the book than I've ever done speaking. You know, speaking is really, you're speaking, you're telling the story that already happened, and you're speaking from the surface. But I feel like this was a piece of my journal. This was a piece of like my heart and my mind that I was giving out to people. And I was scared to do that at first, but then the reaction I saw from family and friends was, wow, we didn't know that all of this was going on. Like we thought you were just angry or just depressed. Like we didn't know that there were all these reasons for all these things, and we didn't know that you still felt inside and you still, you know, wanted to live a good life. And so then after that book, I had met a lot of writers over the last few years, whether it's in this book I have writers from NAMI, This Is My Brave, an organization up in Rhode Island called Peace Love, and I've met all these writers, and the first thing a lot of writers say when I meet them is, oh, yeah, I write, but my writing's no good. And like then, you know, I'll go back to my hotel room and I'll go to their webpage and read their stuff, and I'm like blown away by how amazing it is and how from the heart it is, and I just couldn't believe that there were so many people just like me that like sat in a room for a while. I was like, yeah, I write, but like it's not worth reading. So I just, you know, I took 9 other people that I've met over the last few years that I like their writing better than mine, and I was like, we need to put a book together, you know, we need to do this together, and that's how it started. Yeah.
That's great, and we're going to meet a couple of the other writers in a minute. So we're running out of time for this segment, so would you like to share one of your poems with us from the book? Again, it's Stars, a collection of poetry by Joe Fusaro and a bunch of other talented writers. 2 of them we're going to meet momentarily. So
all right, this is one called I Was Wrong, and it's about, I don't know, it's about resetting my priorities, I guess. Grace, I was wrong, and now I love you even more. I stopped giving Grace all the attention that she deserved. I started focusing on possessions instead of her heart and its worth. I better call Grace before I have no one left to call. I tried to give myself to the world instead of loving the hell out of the ones that give me it all. I better call Grace before I get another raise, because I know if I wait that long, I will once again have already lost it all. And I'm slowly running out of chances. I'm running out of time to keep being wrong.
Wow, that's powerful. So many times we feel blame and stuff like that, and you know, sometimes there are no wrongs, there are no rights. It's a powerful speech. Well, thank you for sharing, Joe. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for changing minds and changing hearts and giving a voice to so many young people. It's powerful stuff, and thank you so much for doing it again. The book Stars, a collection of poetry. Joe Fusaro, the curator. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. All right, so we're back. I'm very lucky to be joined by another duo of very talented writers, Lindsay Wheeler and Allie Hill, who have contributed to the book Stars, a collection of poetry, which I forgot to mention is available on Amazon for those viewers who were inspired by the poetry and want to read more. You can go on Amazon and find Stars, a collection of poetry. So, Lindsay, Allie, welcome. So glad to have you guys.
Thank you.
So both of you, I know both of you pretty well, and you both have done amazing jobs of telling your story in different ways. You know, it's kind of funny. Lindsay, I first met you. We were on Capitol Hill in Washington and doing advocacy, and I was so amazed. Lindsay came up to me. She was kind of shy, and she's like, we were at this meeting at Senator Schumer's office. It wasn't even in his office. It was like in the hallway outside the office because there were so many people. And Lindsay's like, can I tell my story? And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And she told us, just incredible. So can you tell us a little bit about the experience?
Sure, yeah. I was very nervous when I first got there because I figured I needed to have all of this like political knowledge and very like scientific health knowledge. But once I got there, I really felt like I was among family. Like everybody who was speaking had this very like personal take on what they had been through. So I was just like totally inspired to speak. And one of the ones that really stuck out to me was speaking to Representative John Katko. He was just very warm and wonderful, and he spoke about his niece who committed suicide, I think 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and so immediately I was like, wow, that really touched me, and so I shared my story of a string of diagnoses starting with depression, ending with bipolar, and it just really like flowed right out, and it was so comfortable and completely amazing and inspiring.
Right. It's so interesting. You touched on a couple interesting things. Anyone can be an advocate. I think you're right. Everyone's afraid to tell their story or to talk to their representatives. And like I say, our stories are our tools. It's so important. And I think people too make the mistake. I think we're in such like politicized times right now that people think, well, I can't talk to a Republican about this, or only one party will get this. But actually, Rep. Katko is a Republican, and again, with mental illness treating, impacting 1 out of 4 families, you never know who will be impacted, and it really resonated with him. So I think people put up their own barriers. Oh, they're the wrong party, or I don't know enough. But you know enough of your own story to tell it, and it was really interesting. This is a true story. 2 weeks later, I was back. It was a very busy summer in D.C. with the healthcare and everything, and had another meeting with Rep. Katko, and he remarked, I couldn't believe it. It's very rare that they see so many people, but he's like, that young woman who told me that story, he said, I wish my niece had that strength. And that's the most effective thing you can do, is resonate with somebody. And again, a lot of times lobbyists and stuff will come in there with charts, but that doesn't resonate. Stories resonate, the human connection. And that's why it's so important that you talk about it. And Allie, you also have done telling your story in different ways. You've also participated in Ending the Silence and talking to students, but you also participate in crisis intervention team training with police. We actually, our last episode talked all about CIT training, but you do present to police. What's that experience like?
I think that it's so important to have the personal experience element when speaking to police, because they need to know that it's coming from someone that's really going through it, and getting down the floor with that person at their level and really understanding. I think it really brings that personalized element to the presentation. You can hear from clinicians or doctors that are dealing with this. Of course, they're immersed in it just like we are, but they aren't living it as, I guess, thoroughly as we are. And I think that part is just so important for the police to see, that to put a face on it. It isn't someone who is trying to do this on purpose. They're struggling.
Right, and to piggyback on what you were saying a little bit, it's interesting because I participate in the CIT trainings that we do here in Albany County. It's interesting, and here in Albany County it's a county-wide training, so we'll have some from Albany, some from Colonie, so we got a wide swath, which is nice. And they say when we do that part of the panel, when it's like family and people in recovery, that they see people when they're at their worst, when they have to encounter, they're called in, whether it's a family at their worst or the individual at their worst. They say it's so refreshing to see somebody with a mental illness who's not at their worst, that they can be an articulate
because I think what's important to remember too is that this is someone's child, daughter, son, this is a sibling, this is a human being. It's still somebody that's going through this. So I think it's just really important for them to see that.
Yeah, it is, and it puts like I said, the same with politicians, puts the human face on it. I think there's still so many misconceptions about people with mental illness, that they're somehow more dangerous, they're different, they look crazy. I think people still have these stereotypes.
This allows, at least for me, it gave me a different perspective on the police too. It's not that everyone's trying to get out there to get me or something like that. They're trying to learn too, because they don't understand it. And I think that relates so much to just even the public eye too.
Now, you also had a very unique way, and you told your story. You actually had a documentary made about you and your family. So that had to have been an interesting experience.
Yeah, I think it was really astounding experience to see how much, I know my family cares about me. They've been through so much with me, but, just, I guess, hearing so much more about how my mom found NAMI and how it saved our lives. And just to hear from my grandparents how much it's affected them. I had no idea, even though I'm living,
It's always interesting to take that step back. And your grandparents are so cute in the movie, too. They're adorable talking about brain. It's amazing. And that's great, because, we talk about that. I think we've discussed it. Your mom was actually on the show once that, we talk about the misconceptions about mental illness, but in certain cultures, it's even more misconception, including Asian Americans. And she's like, she was so shocked that your grandparents took the time to learn.
Yeah, they really took it upon themselves to try and learn it, because it's not going away, and it's something that's so prevalent, and if we don't learn about it and acknowledge it, we're not getting anywhere.
And both of you, and Joe too, this, we talk about, I think a lot of times when we talk about advocacy, people think it's advocating towards, a government body, but so much of it's self-advocacy and fighting for yourself and fighting to be understood, and that's, I think, battles we have throughout our lives. And your mom is such a great advocate for you, and you guys are such great advocates for yourself. And Lindsay, you've, after I was like, this remarkable young woman who told these great stories that bowled over these Congress people. Then I went and I found LindsayWheelerWriting.com, correct?
LSWheeler.com.
LSWheeler.com.
It's okay, Lindsay Wheeler, the writing of Lindsay Wheeler on Facebook.
That's right. That's what I was getting. So talk about that, actually, your Facebook page and what you're doing with that and the reactions you've gotten.
So in 2014, I kind of had reached a point with my battle that I was just like, I can't do this alone anymore. So I decided to start just speaking publicly, mostly just in the form of posts on Facebook, because that's our big way to communicate, just about my experience. And once I did that, I realized how much traction it had and how many people were affected by it or reached out to me and said, I really hope I'm able to speak out about my own issues one day, and so on. And so I decided I would start a blog and start just writing actual pieces. The first piece I ever wrote was for this organization at my alma mater that was formed after I spoke out. A couple of my friends were like, we need to bring this to campus. And it was just an incredible process. So I started kind of amassing a decent following and meeting a lot of amazing people, and it was just sort of self-perpetuating. The more that I wrote, the more I wanted to write more, and the more it reached people, my life just really became totally different overnight, it felt like. So that's...
It's interesting, too, and I know we've discussed it in part of the story when I think that impacted the congressman and all the members of Congress that you spoke to, is that when you first started talking about this, I mean, your family was a little more old-fashioned. They didn't want you talking about it, correct? And you really had to be a self-advocate on this.
Yeah, and also I grew up in a very small town in Connecticut where people are wonderful and supportive, but a lot of times these things are completely swept under the rug because nobody wants to appear like they have the child who is going through this very dark thing. And on the outside, I was every other Connecticut athlete going to college, but inside I was going through so much turmoil. And so I think it was just very shocking for my parents at first to accept that this was the reality because I hid it so well, and then also accept the fact that I would now be speaking out about it and people would know more about it's very intrusive and whatever. And so at first I just remember my dad was like, just don't shout it from the rooftops. That was like his quote, and he's wonderful and supportive, but it was one of those moments where I was like, I'm just going to do what I want to do right now. And now looking back, like they would 100% say I made the right decision. So it's just, I think sometimes I am very privileged to be able to speak out about it and to be able to have traction with what I'm talking about. But it definitely, you need to like trust your gut when it comes to something like this and be able to just do what you need to do for yourself and hopefully help others.
Right. It's amazing because it's funny. Somehow it's so hard to advocate. People are worried about advocating towards like politicians and stuff, but you actually had to advocate to your own family and say, this is who I am, this is me, and I was so grateful you are screaming it from the rooftops. And what amazes me too is the type of feedback you've gotten from your writing and the website and how it's impacted friends, and kind of, it's like you put this stuff out, people start coming out from the woodwork. So can you talk a little bit about that type of reaction?
I mean, it's unbelievable, honestly, like the impact it can have, because I feel like every day we are so consumed by this like constant stream of information, media, people talking, but a lot of the times there really is no substance or reality to that. And I think so once you share a story that's actually real, it can seriously, it gets passed on and shared. And so suddenly I was having readers in like Germany and England and Africa, like all over. It was unbelievable. And people reaching out and saying, I grew up like with this situation, and it was something I completely couldn't relate to, but the common thread was that we had both gone through a lot of depression, for example. And so it was amazing. And I had a lot of people who had said, like, your writing helped me overcome thoughts of suicide and things like that. And every time I hear that, obviously, it's just like so meaningful and so incredible. So these people have all helped me so much too.
Well, that's awesome. And I say about working at NAMI all the time, like, the job has given me back more than I've given it. And the work that all of you are doing are incredible. There's a saying by Allie that always really resonated with me, is that to save a life is to save a generation. And what you guys are doing are saving lives. And I'm glad you know that, and I'm glad you're doing it. So I do want to hear from each of your poems. But before we get to that, just a piece of advice. If you have people who are watching, maybe a younger person who is afraid to talk about it, what advice would you give them?
I think what's important to realize too is that advocacy isn't just talking about it. It can be really subtle. You can wear a green ribbon or a yellow ribbon. It doesn't have to be, saying or tattooing on your forehead that you have depression or something like that. You can advocate in really subtle ways and really just start the conversation about it. I feel like the more we talk about it, the further we get.
Right. I think something I talk about a lot too is I think people don't know, they're so afraid, they don't know the right way to start the conversation, but there really isn't a wrong way to start the
conversation. There's no right or wrong way, it just is.
You just have to jump in. It's like a pool. And
Exactly. Excuse me. For me, it's like, I think I was so affected by this knowledge that in the past we couldn't speak about these things and that they were all like very hush-hush. I know my great-grandmother actually was hospitalized for major depression issues back in like the 20s and 30s. Wow. And so that kind of a thing, like that was kept very quiet. But people went through the same things, and today, like, there really is space to be able to talk about these things. So for me, it's like, trust your gut, like, know that people will be there for you, and if you lose anyone in the process, then you have people like us who are all like really excited to know you.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a wonderful thing. So we're almost out of time. We only have about 2 more minutes. So I do want to hear a poem from each of you from the new book, Stars, the collection of poetry, which you can purchase on Amazon, and get to read more from Lindsay, Allie, and Joe. So I think Lindsay's going to go. Allie's going to go first.
This one's called Too Late. It's just really about suicidality, and that suicide is a permanent decision to something that's temporary or may be temporary. So that's really what it's about. There's nothing worse than too late. When it's too late, time burns itself out, searing itself permanently into every fiber of your being. This is consuming, and then it's too late. Nearest to the edge, furthest from a grip, fingers extend till they are clutching nothing, and everything is free-falling. Like the air took a breath in the space that oxygen holds itself, swallowing hard like a gasp of carbon, struggling to preface it all in an arid desert. But by the time death reaches you, it's too late, and nothing is worse than too late.
Wow, that's very powerful. Lindsay?
This is about some of my challenges with eating disorders and just trying to figure out what recovery means, because it is a lifelong thing. It's called Santa Stone. Lately, I've found terror on my dinner plate again. Please have a side of paralysis with your chicken. The mirror is no enemy to me anymore. It's learning to unlearn the art of starvation that once robbed me minutes, seconds, hours of my life. It's losing control each and every day and going to sleep knowing I may never have it back. And they say that's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's falling out of love with the first one who made you feel whole, with the one who taught you how to walk with poise and balance. Where's the piece of my heart that refuses to let go of dark chapters, the heart that tells me I can win only to call off the game before I've had a chance to bat? Years and years of therapy and booklets and practice and pills equate to nothing on a plate. The day I chose to turn off the noise, to let trailing voices of intolerance find demise, the wind died too. I stopped spinning in place, stumbling over a heavy heart, looking to belong to a club crafted by society. I am the girl who started living when she closed her eyes and took those first steps in the dark, who hit the floor like ice on hot cast iron the first time she realized who she was. Swallowing her regrets and insecurities was all that could keep her from drowning. Still dragged to the surface, sometimes they roll in on white caps of doubt. The noise says it to hide if you're different, if your head wonders what's wrong with your heart. Give in to the hurt or let it be your every reason to break free from the lead weights that restrain you. If you find you can't live above the pain, swim with its current. It only serves to kill you if you pretend it doesn't exist. Let it carry you to the top of the hills your heart has wailed from for years. Late nights staring at blank ceilings, incoming breakdowns that hide behind colored sunsets, nothing that can't be eased with hunger. Hunger is so much safer than brave sacrifice. It's the slow drawl of regret finding its way onto the tongue. Hunger is the absence that makes me whole. It makes me feel whole, at least, a perception stronger at times than reality itself. It is a transparent window between me and my dreams, clouding with smoke the minute rigid rules are broken. Dreams buried in ash are nothing more than misplaced memories. Breathe in the deepest drags of self-acceptance. Let your worries fall in perfect lines and wipe them out of view. Falling like snow, they're far enough away now that a deep inhale won't bring them back into your lungs. And breathe. It shouldn't hurt anymore. Shouldn't be so labored. The asthmatic gas of guilt should soon subside. They can't have the satisfaction of watching you fail if you don't allow them to. Let the shattered pieces of your soul emulsify. Your spirit is a mosaic too beautiful to be the eighth wonder. Light a flame behind it and worship the skin, flesh, and bones that you are. There will come a day where the apathy you feel will fracture the walls you hide behind, not the fragile walls that cradle your heart. It is not your fault that you ache in places you did not know you have. It takes shedding your baby skin and finding your grown-up hands to learn who you are. Pick up the fork crumbling into sand between your fingertips. Make it whole. You are as powerful as the magician you've never believed in. Show the world your weathered eyes, not the face of the robot you've become. Be the disordered thing that you are, the person you looked up to when you were 13. Love those who can draw the real you out, and you will win the game.
Wow, it's so powerful. And thank you for sharing, and thank you for telling your story. And as we always say here on Mental Health Now, hope starts with you. And I can't think of three people who exemplify that better. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for our writers. And we will see you next time on Mental Health Now.